Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're here for the Stacksmith and AWS webinar. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our hosts. We have Matthew Small from Bitnami. He's the head of solutions architecture. We have David Duncan from AWS, and we have Sanjay Garje from AWS. All right, Matt, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anisha. Appreciate the introduction. Thank you all for joining. I'll cover the agenda here real quick, and then we'll get right into the content. We've got some great content and great demos for you today, and are looking forward to speaking with you after this about your use cases and requirements and how we can enable you to make better use of Amazon Web Services with Stacksmith. With our agenda today, we'll introduce Bitnami, how we look at the world, our company, and the products that we sell. We'll narrow in on Stacksmith for enterprise application packaging, reviewing the solutions and the problems that it solves. We'll then kick it over to Sanjay to talk more about AWS Service Catalog and leveraging AWS Service Catalog to enforce best practices at deployment time and governance and cost control. We'll then show you a demonstration of Stacksmith continuously maintaining applications in AWS Service Catalog and how an integration with AWS Service Catalog makes it better together. And we'll talk about next steps where you can get access to Stacksmith for your projects and your open source initiatives. Just a bit of background on Bitnami as we get started. I'm sure you all are aware of AWS, but you may or may not have heard of Bitnami before. We were founded in 2005 with headquarters in San Francisco. We also have an office in Sevilla, Spain. Over 70 employees in 10 different countries. And we've been working closely with AWS since 2008. That is indeed when AWS really came to market with the initial versions of EC2 and S3. Bitnami's been a partner in cloud with AWS since the beginning. This included Bitnami as an AWS Marketplace launch partner. I'll talk a little bit about where you may have found Bitnami's name before in the AWS ecosystem. And our assets in that marketplace are deployed over 1.5 million times per month. So Bitnami packaged applications are quite popular and deployed by users around the world. Our mission is to make awesome software available to everyone, everywhere. And our method is to make it easy to package those applications, make them deploy ready in your desired formats across various clouds, your desktop, even mobile, and containers, and to help you maintain those over time. You may have come across Bitnami's name if you've ever searched for any open source product in the AWS Marketplace. Our application catalog has over 130 different applications and runtimes that are cloud ready. In AWS, just go to the marketplace and search for anything from WordPress to RabbitMQ to Kafka, and chances are the first or second result you'll see says certified by Bitnami. What this means is that it's maintained and up to date. It's not subject to any outstanding CVEs. It's patched and ready to go. It's optimized for AWS. It leverages AWS native services. For example, our WordPress solution on AWS even includes the Amazon Poly plugin for text-to-speech. We do this in multiple formats, so you can launch across AWS as well as their container platforms and inclusive of their PaaS components. Stacksmith is a continuation of this for the enterprise. It gives enterprises and mid-sized businesses the ability to package their own applications, whether it's custom engineered applications, commercial off-the-shelf applications, or open source applications that need to be packaged according to your organization's specifications. And it allows you to create trusted packages, maintain those over time in an optimized format for the cloud or container platform that you're targeting. What we'll show you today is Stacksmith generating and maintaining AWS native templates and images, CloudFormation templates and AMIs, as well as PaaS integrations like RDS. You may also come across Bitnami's name in the Kubernetes ecosystem. This is where you'll find the majority of our open source projects and contributions. And there are important projects there like KubeApps, which is a service catalog for Kubernetes Helm charts, Kubeless for function as a service on top of Kubernetes, and we're a core maintainer of Helm, which you'll see featured today in Stacksmith. That's analogous to a CloudFormation template in the Kubernetes world. Of course, today we're going to be talking about Stacksmith for continuous application packaging. Stacksmith takes code and scripts as inputs, and it packages those, generating the native image types, container types, and associated deployment template to get it running in various AWS environments. That could be infrastructure as a service and PaaS components that you want to deploy an application to. It could be one of AWS's container platforms, including ECS, EKS, or Fargate. And it could include, of course, AWS Service Catalog, which we'll talk about today, is a unique opportunity for you to add extra governance and cost management into your deployment process, whether as a self-service provisioning platform or as a proxy to enforce your own organizational best practices. Stacksmith adds additional benefit here by maintaining those images, containers, and deployment templates for the long term. We look upstream and monitor sources for system package updates and critical vulnerabilities and exploits that may affect those system packages, ensuring that your application stays up to date. We also monitor for changes to your code or any scripts that you have to configure that code inside Stacksmith. Those are monitored, detected for change, and Stacksmith can trigger a repackaging process to maintain that application. So whether you're updating application versions, checking code into a CI tool, and triggering a Stacksmith packaging process to generate the assets that you need to deploy it, whether you're packaging golden images and your best practices for deploying those golden images and making them available to the organization, or anything immutable in your stack, Stacksmith is going to help you continuously maintain that over time. The top 3 reasons to use Stacksmith over building all of this yourself would be adding in that continuous maintenance and feedback loop. Stacksmith continuously monitors those internal and external sources, helping you regenerate those immutable assets and providing complete visibility and auditability into this process. We do this across your VM images, your container images, PaaS integration, and the associated deployment templates to help you get this all integrated end to end. And we do this all without locking you in to Stacksmith or to any particular tooling that you may need to integrate with Stacksmith. Stacksmith works alongside your existing tooling, can take code from your existing CI tools, can take scripts from your existing source control tools, can leverage your existing configuration management logic if you've already invested in something like Chef or Puppet or Ansible. And you can take the resulting application packages and images in their native form to the cloud provider of your choice and deploy natively without dependencies. There are 4 key problems that Stacksmith solves. The first that we'll talk about today is continuous image and application security. And that is securing your assets and shortening the replenishment cycles. A lot of things like golden images, for example, are updated on a regular basis, maybe every 30 days if you're doing well. In most cases, once a quarter, every 6 months is a target for many enterprises. A golden image would include your hardened OS configuration and any application package, any system package updates required to keep that up to date and secure. Stacksmith can help you shorten that replenishment cycle and take that update process down to an as-needed basis, ensuring that you're packaging those updates that you need and distributing them to the organization to use the latest up-to-date and secure baselines. We also facilitate cloud transformation and add long-term maintenance to applications that you might be moving or optimizing for AWS. Stacksmith helps you build those AWS native components. It helps you integrate those AWS native features, migrate to using AWS services like RDS, auto-scaling capabilities in EC2, as well as the newer PaaS services such as EMR or others. Stacksmith continuously maintains applications that are packaged through this transformation process, so you also increase your security posture as you're bringing applications from your data center, as you're transitioning them from infrastructure as a service towards containers on EKS, or as you're optimizing them after you've lift and shifted your application to AWS, and now you want to ensure that you're leveraging those best fit services. Once you've developed some frameworks that amount to best practices for your organization, whether this is your golden image framework or an entire application delivery pipeline to continuously deliver your applications to AWS, Stacksmith ensures that your developers' best practices, that your security team's best practices and policies, and that your operations team's best practices and deployment preferences are all factored in together. It enforces that developers have some control over how applications are built and configured. It allows security to enforce that critical tasks such as OS security hardening or integration of IDS tools or centralized logging and monitoring tooling can be set up and consistent each and every time. It allows operations to enforce best practices such as tag governance, as well as the preferred deployment topologies in order to achieve the SLAs that ultimately they're on the hook to deliver. And it packages all of this together into one versionable component that everybody can look inside of and say and answer the question of what is running and how does it run. And then finally, as we'll show today, once you have a delivery and maintenance framework for your golden images and your applications, you can make those very easy to consume in an enterprise service catalog. You can populate and preserve that internal service catalog, and most importantly, keep those assets continuously updated. So consumers from that catalog are always provisioning the latest and greatest security approved applications and components. So what types of images and components does Stacksmith help you package and maintain? This could be anything that is immutable in your stack. That could start with your golden OS image. Perhaps your security team has a specific AMI that they need you to start with for your development. That golden image can be continuously maintained and updated for those system package updates, the specific security hardening steps that your teams take to make that image golden, and can help with the publishing and syndication process so that it's ensured that it's used by your organization. Of course, your teams can then configure all of the things that they need to on top of that OS, knowing that they're starting from your secure baseline. You might add in additional components to create a baseline for configuration management tooling, for example, Chef or Puppet or Ansible. Incorporating in something like your Chef client or other components like monitoring tools, logging tools, intrusion detection systems, ensure that you're factoring in those best practices that your teams will need to be successful. Teams can then take those hardened base images configured up to that point and continue to customize on top. You might then decide to add application, runtime, or framework-specific components. For example, providing a golden baseline for a .NET Core application or a Java Tomcat application. This could factor in and enforce your best practices for things like versioning and maintenance of those types of applications, and then allow your developers to simply configure their code on top of it. And then finally, once you're factoring in all of the application code, which can be done as part of the Stacksmith packaging process, at that point, you've got your application and its configuration on there, all of the runtime dependencies and other components on top of your golden OS. And at that point, you're ready for image-based deployments, including container deployments. You've now got everything in that image, and you need to now maintain that as an immutable object. Stacksmith can help you walk up the staircase towards immutability and image-based container-friendly deployment, and it can help you along the way with all of these immutable components as you make that transition. Finally, we can take you one step further, and that is by generating the associated deployment template to deliver an application end-to-end. This could include multiple images, as well as other services in support of that application, such as an ELB in AWS for a load balancer as a service, a PaaS service or 2 or 3 or 4 integrated to that application, and the backend database as a service that you want to leverage. Instead of running your own database, you might as well leverage something like RDS or Aurora DB in Amazon, where they take a lot of the complexity over database operations and administration off your shoulders. Of course, this also factors in your application deployment best practices, ensuring that your operations team is consistently deploying these applications according to their specifications, and of course are able to support those once they're running in the cloud. This application template package is a CloudFormation template in AWS. It is a native template type that allows you to deploy that application and any AWS service with CloudFormation template support, which is most all of them, consistently with repeatability and in a provisionable unit that encapsulates the delivery of that application end-to-end. That packaging process ensures that there's trust in the middle of your DevOps handoff. DevOps is a process of passing applications from development to operations, and many of you may have seen this lemon skate chasing its tail. As you continuously do things in DevOps, you're continuously improving in your process. Stacksmith actually puts a packaged asset, a handshake, at the middle of this process so that your developers who are focused on the things that they do best and your operations team and security teams focused on the things that they do best can both answer the question of what is running and how does it run when we provision this to the cloud. And that is by looking in to that application package. As mentioned, Stacksmith also supports the migration of applications to AWS native cloud services, optimizing the infrastructure around the application. We like to refer to this as replatforming because we can even take your existing application code and scripts, applications that you may still be running in the data center, and we can allow them to leverage native AWS services. Anything that a CloudFormation template can run, you can incorporate into a Stacksmith transformation process. And when you package that application code and enough configuration logic to get it running, Stacksmith can generate an ops-approved topology to get that deployed natively to AWS. This is just a selection of some sample AWS services that you may want to leverage as part of that transformation. And it's important to reiterate that this type of transformation can happen as you're moving applications to AWS, migrating those applications from the data center. It can also occur if you've already done a lift and shift. If you've already made a transition of an application to AWS in a like-for-like VM to VM way, you can use Stacksmith to help transform that application and make better use of those services that AWS provides. When we talk about Stacksmith as an application delivery and maintenance framework, this is really about enforcing policies across the organization. Engineering teams are focused on managing source, integrating their code, and testing. Compiled code is sent as the output to Stacksmith, where the DevOps team helps to integrate services and accelerate the adoption of applications from those engineering teams. Security teams will want to contribute their policies to enforce compliance or install the components that they need to ensure that their compliance requirements are met. And Stacksmith sends a deployable application or deploy-ready components downstream to your operations team, where they will deploy those, update their existing, and of course, assist in the testing of those application deployments. Stacksmith sits right in the middle here to generate and maintain the assets required to do all of this. This is the grunt work that a DevOps team typically has to deal with. And instead, the DevOps team can be more focused on enablement, coordinating the various stakeholders from these teams, ensuring that all of their opinions and policies are factored into the packaging process, and integrating their tool sets with Stacksmith in order to enforce that centrally without having them have to learn something new. To that effect, we can take any of your existing upstream tooling from your software engineering groups, anything or any way that your security team is using to enforce IT policy. Perhaps their golden image hardening script is a chef recipe. We can take that automation and we can package it in. Perhaps it's just a shell script stored in GitHub. We can even watch that Git repository and ensure that if that configuration logic is updated and a new policy is put in place, Stacksmith can continuously regenerate all of the assets to leverage that new policy. We also, of course, monitor those external sources as well, ensuring that this is a continuous process, whether that's new code coming from engineering, new policy coming from security or the IT organization, or new packages and affected packages by critical vulnerabilities and exploits, that those are monitored, packaged in, and sent downstream to your deployment tooling of choice. You can wrap those application packages in your existing process. You can, of course, feed them into a service catalog, as well as deploy them with existing tools such as Terraform, Nomad, or anything else. Today in the demonstration, we're going to show you the final use case, which is using Stacksmith to build and maintain cloud service catalogs. This ensures that continuous updates are continuously delivered and that you're able to manage configuration drift, ensuring that the things that you get packaged by Stacksmith from those trusted sources are the things that actually get deployed in AWS. In fact, AWS just launched a new feature this week to help you manage configuration drift in CloudFormation templates. And this can ensure that last mile between the Stacksmith packaging process, Stacksmith placing that in your trusted asset repositories, and when you actually go to provision those through AWS Service Catalog or CloudFormation, the CloudFormation UI, that configuration hasn't drifted from your trusted baselines. Offering a service catalog is one of the best things that you can do as an organization to promote adoption of cloud in a controlled way. The service catalog sets the guardrails for things like governance on the deployment policies, what inputs can be set, and it makes it simple for consumers to be able to self-select, self-input, and self-provision those applications to AWS. The unfortunate side effect of a service catalog is if you let those applications get old or outdated, at that point, it's actually doing you a disservice where you are provisioning outdated and perhaps insecure applications on a consistent and repeatable basis. Stacksmith completes the picture here by ensuring that you are continuously delivering trusted baseline assets that are up to date and maintained to that catalog so that users can leverage the latest updated and secure assets in deployment. With this, I'm going to pass it over to Sanjay. Sanjay is the Senior Technical Business Development Manager for AWS Service Catalog, and he's going to tell us a bit more. Sanjay, please take it away.
Thank you, Matt. Great overview so far. Really loving it. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time this morning to learn a few things here. So happy to share. Most of my customers, when I talk to them about AWS Service Catalog, right, most of the time, the first question is, hey, what the heck is AWS Service Catalog, right? And obviously, the rate at which we're innovating, the fast cliff at which we keep delivering new services, it's very natural to get lost into the whole, hey, what's the new thing now, right? So this picture here does kind of a good job of explaining and giving you some mental kind of notes on how to think about Service Catalog. So everybody pretty much knows about EC2, that's for compute, S3 is for storage. But when you think about the management services that we offer, so these are the services AWS offers to manage the other services, that's where the Service Catalog in this picture can help you figure out how the whole thing works together, right? So any customer's journey typically starts in cloud with resource provisioning, right? So that's your first bucket here. The second bucket is config management. That's where we have the OpsWorks and Systems Manager. The third is the monitoring and performance. So I'm sure most people have heard about CloudWatch and used it in production as well. And then the fourth bucket here is governance and compliance, and AWS Service Catalog is called out here again. And then the resource optimization, that's our trusted advisor service. So the key takeaway on this slide is, if you want to provision your AWS resources, and at the same time you want to bake in the proactive governance and compliance, if you combine that number 1 bucket and number 4 bucket, the Venn diagram, right, that's AWS Service Catalog. So anytime in your organization you want to provision AWS resources and you also want to proactively enforce governance and compliance, you want to leverage AWS Service Catalog for that. All right. So with that, if we jump into the next one, right, in most businesses today, right, they're digital businesses and everybody's moving to the cloud because of the agility, the time to market, and innovation that it allows the developers and the engineers to drive on behalf of business and disrupt, completely new segments. And as that is happening, the enterprise IT is still worried about, things like, hey, what happens if I come back on a Monday and I get a surprise expensive monthly or weekly bill because somebody just racked up like huge cost in our GPU EC2 instance family that they shouldn't have done that, right? Or maybe somebody spun up a new S3 bucket that was open to the whole world, and now that caused a security breach because some important information got leaked because of that, right? Or maybe a developer or team did something that they were not following the best practices, and that caused either unforeseen outage or poor performance for the application. So obviously, as the enterprise IT, the central operations team or the infrastructure team, you don't want to slow them down, but at the same time, you want to give them all the guardrails and the self-service ability where the right security best practices, right? Because we have 125 plus services. Each of those services has their own set of best practices and guardrails. And then as the enterprise IT of your own company, you probably have your own set of best practices. Your InfoSec team has their own given guardrails. So as a service provider to your rest of the business units and developers and community, you want to think of creating this self-service managed IT experience where the developers and the other teams can come in, discover the right allowed versioned IT services through Service Catalog, and they can self-serve without causing any of those other, spending problem or unforeseen outages or other security breaches, right? So that's why you use Service Catalog. And in this new cloud era, right, you can't do things the old way. So in order to tap into the innovation and the agility, you do want to use the new tools. And AWS Service Catalog is that new tool built precisely to kind of meet in the middle and continuously drive innovation at the same time, give you the governance and compliance that's needed. So with that, if we jump into the next slide, the key use cases that we offer is obviously you can manage the life cycle of your IT service. And what do I mean by IT service? Pretty much as Matt called out, right? Infrastructure as a code, anything and everything that you can create in AWS through CloudFormation, infrastructure as a code, can be packaged as a IT service, and that can be versioned. And you can maintain all of that in a central AWS Service Catalog portfolio that rest of the company across all the hundreds of accounts that you have can still be tapping into the same version. So it becomes your job as the IT administrator really, really simple, and gives you a lot more control and a lot more visibility. The other key feature we have is the ability to tag. And so even if you talk to the expert AWS practitioner, they don't tag things on a daily basis because it's one of those activities like, eating healthy food. We all know it's the right thing to do, but how often do we make that same choice every time, right? So what AWS Service Catalog allows you to do is enforce tagging. You get to bake those tags, and Matt is going to show some of that during his demo. And so every time a developer or a business user or a data scientist, when they're interacting with AWS Service Catalog and launching and self-servicing that service, they must enter those tags in order to proceed further and get that resource provisioned in AWS. So that itself is a huge benefit. And that tagging forms the foundation for you to then apply your cost governance and security governance. We do offer the self-service portal. So as an end user, the business users can come to a really simplified AWS console where they don't have to look through all the other 125 services, and they only get to see and discover and launch things that you as the central IT have provisioned and pre-blessed for them. Obviously, given all the standardization of versioning, it helps you drive the standardization of infrastructure as well as reference architecture across the company. So that's a huge benefit. Then we talked about governance and compliance proactively. So this really, because you are the team that's working with the InfoSec team and the application teams and everybody proactively to pre-bless those architectures and infrastructure as a code, you really bake in that governance and compliance proactively. And the last but not the least, which is the integration with ITSM tools such as ServiceNow. So many enterprises today use ServiceNow for self-service. So as the employees of those enterprises, the employees are not only requesting keyboards and mouse and new laptops through ServiceNow, but they're also using ServiceNow to request new AWS services. And what we have done, AWS Service Catalog team, we have launched a free connector called ServiceNow Service Catalog Connector that you can download from ServiceNow store. And if you already have the existing ITSM ServiceNow module, you can plug that into it, and you can give your rest of the company ability to request self-serve AWS resources right through ServiceNow. So, and I do like an hour, 2 hour long dive deep just into that piece. But these are some of the key benefits why a lot of enterprises, when they're migrating into AWS, they're using AWS Service Catalog as their orchestration tool to achieve that governance, to achieve that compliance, and at the same time not slow anybody down. So customers and employees get the benefit of cloud, why they wanted to begin that journey in the first place. So with that, Matt, back to you.
Thank you, Sanjay. I just love the fact that we both have handshakes in our presentation, and that Stacksmith can provide that trusted handshake between developers handing off their code to the operations team as built assets, and AWS Service Catalog providing that trusted handshake to ensure that things get provisioned according to policy at deployment time. So with that, why don't we show it? It's demo time. So here's the Stacksmith UI, and for today's demonstration, we're actually I'll show you a few of the key features here of Stacksmith, and we're going to show this in complement to the AWS Service Catalog. I'm going to take Jenkins and I'm going to package and update Jenkins, and that update is going to be made available in the AWS Service Catalog for provisioning. This allows me to version and maintain my Jenkins release for my consumers that are accessing that through the AWS Service Catalog, and I'll also show you how to keep your Jenkins instances up to date for system package updates and any CVEs, critical vulnerabilities and exploits that may affect them. So here's a few applications that have already been packaged, and as you can see, it's a broad mix, and many are packaged both for AWS and Kubernetes, including this Jenkins application here. When I packaged this application, I provided the inputs, as mentioned, code and scripts. So in the case of Jenkins, that input is my WAR file for Jenkins. I grab that directly off the Jenkins website here, and I grab the LTS release version 2.138.3, which you see, I must have fat fingered that, but which you see should match here. As I've packaged it. I've also got Stacksmith linked to my GitHub repository so that my configuration logic for Jenkins can also be dynamic. This could be configuration logic for my security hardening policies for my OS or the application itself. It could be any build dependencies for an application. The boot logic for that application to configure itself. For example, how does my custom application connect to a database? And the nice thing about Stacksmith is that you can just point to those scripts directly in source control. And Stacksmith will actually monitor that repository and check for updates. Here you can see, since I just packaged this, there have not been any updates to that boot or build logic in my scripts, and so Stacksmith does not recommend repackaging this application for that reason. We also have a full and detailed manifest of all of the system packages that went into the images, the AMIs, that were built as part of this process, as well as the Docker containers built as part of this process. We also, of course, have a full log of every step that Stacksmith used to actually configure this application and build these images. These logs are persisted, allowing you to version and maintain these over time. So simply from providing a WAR file and enough logic to get that application running, I can generate the required AMIs, the required CloudFormation template to deploy this application and connect it up to a database. In this case, it's MySQL running on RDS, which is why I don't have another AMI just for MySQL here, because we'll let Amazon take care of that for us. And I have the ability to provision this application directly using that CloudFormation template and those AMIs in AWS. I also have another format available here in Docker containers and a Helm chart. My containers were stored in Elastic Container Registry. I have a Helm chart, which is analogous to a CloudFormation template for deploying applications in Kubernetes, orchestrating multiple containers for deployment. And I have the ability, of course, to provision that directly with the Helm chart in EKS. I can also take those Docker containers and leverage those in any of the other AWS container services like Fargate. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to take this Jenkins application and we're going to update it. And then we're going to show you how that update propagates over to the AWS Service Catalog. So here for this example, I'm actually going to go from this version of Jenkins, which was the LTS version, and instead we're actually going to package the weekly version. So that's version 2.151, which I've got the WAR file for here. In this case, my trusted repository for this application is my local machine. Of course, you could have this pointing to whichever repository you would like to pull these applications from as well, including public sources or your private repositories. So I've updated the application version there because I care about that. Of course, if you're doing continuous delivery of your own custom applications, that application version might just be automatically updated by your CI tool as Stacksmith is packaging from your built application there. I've got my WAR file uploaded. This upload actually went directly to my own AWS account. This entire packaging process from the origins that we upload these applications to the destination where these applications are delivered to, and the entire packaging process in the middle takes place securely within my own AWS account. One of the first things that you're going to be asked to do when you sign up for Stacksmith is to register your AWS account so that you can package your application securely therein. I've already got Stacksmith pointed at my Git repository. It is worth noting if you do not have source control for these scripts, you can also, of course, upload those directly. We provide this nice UI experience so that even applications that don't have sophisticated pipelines can take advantage of the transformation benefits and the packaging benefits, and of course the long-term maintenance benefits of Stacksmith. So we're going to go ahead and update my application. And as you can see, this put version 2.151 into the oven, and there are two builds that are going to happen simultaneously. I'm building a build that's going to be EKS ready. In fact, I'm using AWS's code build service here to actually configure the containers. And I'm building a new AMI and CloudFormation template to be delivered to Service Catalog to provision this new version of Jenkins in the Service Catalog. This packaging process takes about 5 to 7 minutes, and so we're going to revisit this just towards the end to see this updated in AWS Service Catalog. Now let's take a look at this version of Jenkins that I packaged a while ago. So, here I've got the same version of Jenkins that I packaged, same inputs, same repository here. But this was packaged back on October 19th, about a month ago. And I've turned off automatic updates here so I can show you that Stacksmith is tracking the fact that there are system package updates available, although fortunately in this case, none of those are security fixes. None of those are critical vulnerabilities and exploits that need to be patched for this particular application. But I have a very easy way to understand what needs to be updated. I can simply go to my system package list here, and instead of viewing all of the system packages, I can filter that down to just the available updates for my application. any system package that makes it to system D is something that Stacksmith can monitor upstream for those updates. And in this case, maybe I just want to stay on this same version, the LTS version of Jenkins. I'm not going to supply new code to this process, but I do want to update Java and the OpenJDK here. So all I need to do for a feedback loop to maintain this application is click this repackage button. That's going to schedule a new packaging job. It's going to pull in those new system package updates, and it's going to deliver the requisite containers, AMIs, and the associated deployment templates to my preferred repository for deployment. This gives you a quick and easy model to maintain applications for these updates over time as needed, as well as an easy model to update code and code versions and allow customers in your organization to consume new and updated applications. Now let's take a look over an AWS service catalog. Actually zoom out here. AWS Service Catalog provides a nice experience for that provisioning process. Here, as you can see, I have a few applications that I've proxied over here to AWS Service Catalog. And it's quite easy for me to click on one of these applications, see what the available version is, take a look at the description, which was automatically populated by Stacksmith. Note some of the tags that Stacksmith itself is also enforcing. So at build time, because we're building an associated deployment template, Stacksmith can also enforce resource tags on your components, ensuring that you've got the governance and cost management capabilities that you'll need to filter this stuff on the back end. Of course, AWS Service Catalog also affords me that ability. I can select my versions of the application, give it a name, new app, and it gives me the ability to set some of those deployment time parameters. I can set only the parameters that my operations team has allowed me to set. So in this case, I have a selection of instance class. I can take a look at setting the password here for my application. This, in this case, is configured by one of those boot scripts in order to configure RDS. These are some RDS configuration parameters like retention policies. I can also set the number of instances to start here for my application, as well as my SSH key. Again, this curation is done entirely by CloudFormation template inputs. And Stacksmith generates and enforces the CloudFormation template. You can make this process as transparent or as locked down and opaque as you would like to make it, depending on what your delivery requirements are. Hitting next leads me to tag options, which is a great feature for additional tag enforcement in the service catalog. For example, I have 3 tags that I have to set here. My BU, I'm part of the customer app team, launching one of these customer apps. The cost center, this is going into test. And in this case, I have a tag to flag data residency requirements. So I'm going to select the USA. We'll hit next, we'll validate, and we'll hit launch. That's an entire end-to-end provisioning process in AWS Service Catalog, leveraging CloudFormation templates as well as AMIs and RDS on the back end to deliver my application end-to-end. I want to show you briefly the provision products list where I've got some available applications, including Jenkins on AWS. These apps take about 10 to 15 minutes to launch. So I did launch one ahead of time, and I've got everything that I've provisioned according to policy. I've got the link to that CloudFormation stack where I can see everything that CloudFormation template did for me in order to provision my application and all of the required components. I've got the ability to go to my application here. If the Zoom control panel will get out of my way. I can pop into that application simply by looking at that CloudFormation output here in Service Catalog, and I can add records to the database because RDS is configured according to my policies. So that's end-to-end from packaging to delivery. Now let's check back in on Stacksmith here. We'll take a look. It looks like our update is now available here. We've packaged version 2.151. I've got my full log, my full manifest, my AMIs were delivered, my CloudFormation template was delivered. And when we pop back in to the AWS Service Catalog and we take a look at our products list, what we'll see when we go to Jenkins is my original version and my new 2.151 version that was just packaged. I have the ability, of course, to take this same launch time enforcements of tag policy and procedure in AWS Service Catalog, thanks to those tag options, and deliver Jenkins now end-to-end to my consumers. Of course, Service Catalog can also curate the required versions. In this case, I'm now offering a choice between the LTS version and the weekly build version. And maybe I want to offer that as a choice. Of course, if I don't, I can deprecate previous versions of these applications to control that provisioning process as well. With that, we've now shown you end-to-end packaging from source code, from compiled code, all the way up through delivering a provision-ready object into a service catalog with a complete chain of custody from the WAR file I uploaded to the application that will actually get provisioned into AWS. I've also shown you that we can do this with multiple formats, one common process for both your containers as well as your public cloud requirements. So what's next? Please contact us and let's talk use cases and integrations. It doesn't matter what you have upstream or downstream. Stacksmith is a unique product that can integrate and provide some general policy enforcement across the board for you. If you're ready to evaluate, you can go to bitnami.com/Stacksmith and request a team trial. Our team edition supports the configuration of private repositories, monitoring those repositories for changes. But also I'll note, if you're an open source developer with public repositories, we do offer a free version of Stacksmith. Check out Stacksmith Public and connect Stacksmith Public to your repositories in order to package your open source projects for AWS for free. I want to thank you all for your time today, and at this point, we're going to open it up for some questions.
Thank you, Matt. We actually do have a couple questions here. So one is, this demo looked really simple. Is that really the case? How much cloud experience do I need to use Stacksmith? And how difficult is it to prepare my applications for use?
Great questions. So Stacksmith can meet you where you are in your cloud maturity process. What we need as input is compiled code and enough configuration logic to get that code running on the operating system. Our professional services team can certainly help you with the last mile there, what's required to actually get that deployed in AWS, providing advisement and assistance and professional services to help design that for you. But between your application and your desired topology in AWS, that's what you need to bring to the table with Stacksmith. Stacksmith packages it all together and ensures that continuous maintenance cycle. The integration with AWS Service Catalog is rather simple. Stacksmith has a full RESTful API. Service Catalog also has some great APIs, and you can easily stitch those two products together.
Great. What are the additional benefits of using Service Catalog over straight CloudFormation?
Great.
So,
Yeah, I can take that one. That's a very astute question. If you want to use CloudFormation in production and you want to give self-service ability to launch resources through that, the key nuance there is each individual developer or a business user that you're allowing them to launch that CloudFormation template needs to have the underlining IAM privilege to interact with any and all the AWS components or resources that CloudFormation template is provisioning. What that means is, I'm sure the security experts amongst you are, don't like that already, and that's the right thing, right? You do not want to give, the blast radius is the key, right? AWS offers shared security model, and if you want to truly enable self-service, you want to lock down access as much as possible, right? This deny all and only allow what should be allowed. So Service Catalog does a great job in terms of locking down all that access. And there's a feature we provide called launch constraint. So essentially think of that as like a pseudo or assume role. So without giving the end users direct IAM privileges to RDS or SageMaker or any of the other underlying services, you can essentially only allow them to interact with AWS Service Catalog product, so they can still come in, log on to the AWS Service Catalog end user portal, discover that product, launch that product without having underlying IAM permissions. So they cannot go away, go into the AWS console directly and launch the EC2 like GPU instance, right? Or spin up something without the tagging. So Service Catalog gives you that additional governance and helps you reduce your blast radius. And that's why I would use Service Catalog in production over giving developers direct access to CloudFormation.
Great. Thank you, Sanjay. I appreciate that. All right. It looks like we're hitting the end of the hour. We appreciate everyone joining us today. There will be a recording of this webinar being distributed out to the attendees as well as anybody who's registered. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the Stacksmith team. We will provide our contact information. Thank you.
thank you all.
Thank you.